Well, g'day guys. Welcome to Dream Design Do TV with Zaki Ameer. I'm your host, Peter Montgomery from the petermontgomeryshow.com. Now, Zaki has done an amazing thing where he's built a property portfolio of $3 million in the short space of 3 years with only 15 properties. Now, the amazing thing is he did this with a low startup capital. And every week we catch up with Zaki to find out, how he does what he does for him and his clients. So, Zaki, looking at your property portfolio of 15 properties and the properties that you source for your clients, I've noticed that they're kind of under the 500K mark, and just wanted to ask, what's your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, hi Peter. The question about why I tend to invest below the $500,000 purchase price, even for myself and for my clients, comes from my own investing journey in which I started with a limited amount of capital. So, following that journey and being successful in that, I later realized when I started the Dream Design property for my clients that it actually made sense financially to actually invest in the lower end of, say, the property value market. Simply the reasons behind that is obviously the startup capital as you would bring into the table would make a difference. So if a client comes in, for example, with $100,000 capital, I would then tend to invest below the $500,000 mark because how much capital you have dictates how much deposit you could put in towards a property. Now, if you came, let's just say hypothetically, with $1 million worth of equity, then the scenario would change and we would look at things differently. But let's just say for generally a majority of, my clients tend to have around that $100,000, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. And the reason behind that is because the amount of funds you require per property would be less in terms of buying $1 million property, in which if your deposit is about 10%, then your entire $100,000 has gone towards the one property. Secondly, comes to the diversification in terms of buying just one property, say in one particular area, for example, whether it's in Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane, closer to the city, or as opposed to, say, buying 4 properties with the $100,000 using the strategy I use and purchasing in different areas, in different locations that have different demographics, then it tends to be more diversified. Now, let's just say why it's important to diversify. For example, if the market makes an adjustment and the property values are starting to slide down due to a correction, by you having one property in one particular area, that one single property gets affected by its downturn value. However, if you had, say, 3, 4, or 5 properties diverse in different locations and because of different demographics, I wouldn't normally expect all those areas to come down in value at the same time. And that's why when I source properties for my clients, I diversify the areas I source so that there are no more than, say, for example, 3 properties, depending on the strategy in one particular location. The other part is also when you're saying creating value. See, most of my strategies tend to be on creating value, to create equity, as opposed to waiting on market capital growth. Now, if you have one property, you can only create the value, say, for example, renovations or dual income, building a granny flat, only on that one property. However, if you had 4 or 5 properties, then you would be able to create value in all of those properties, depending on the properties I source for my clients. So even on that instance, it makes sense to diversify and then use that deposit in multiple properties. And you can only do that usually if the purchase price tends to be, less than 500. More likely, I would recommend around the $300,000 to $350,000 mark, depending on that individual property and my client's situation. Some clients or the market perception would think that, okay, look, if I buy closer to the CBD for maybe $600,000, $700,000 mark, I might get larger capital growth than purchasing these smaller properties in not so close to CBD areas. In my experience, that's not actually true, and using the research I use from the market, there tends to be areas where you can actually purchase for $300,000, $350,000 mark, and the capital growth is far greater, say, over the last few years than what you would expect closer to the city, paying much more for a property. And that tends to be driven by factors such as population growth, migration growth, industries around the area. And so that's part of the research I do for my client.
Okay, so to kind of recap and see if I understand correctly, it's about the size of the deposit going in, but even if you have a large deposit, say like, you got a lot of money to go into and buy a $1 million property or something like that, even then you would suggest, going for the smaller type properties under that 5K mark because you can diversify. So the deposit determines that, but it actually creates success by going that way, even if you have a lot of money to put in there.
Correct. That's correct, Peter.
Excellent, man. All right. Thanks so much, Zaki. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Peter.